What if everything we thought we knew about who counts as human was suddenly overturned? For centuries, Neanderthals were painted as brutal, primitive, and alien, a separate species destined to vanish in the shadows of our greatness. But shocking fossil discoveries now whisper a different story, one that erases the hard lines between them and us. Evidence carved into ancient bones, DNA hidden deep within our cells, and tools that rival our own suggest that Neanderthals were not outsiders at all, but kin humans in every sense of the word. And the truth changes everything. When the first Neanderthal bones were unearthed in the 19th century, their heavy brows and thick skulls struck researchers as alien, brutish, almost monstrous, and for generations that image stuck, casting them as a failed experiment in evolution, a cousin that stumbled while we rose, a symbol of what we were never meant to be. But as science has sharpened its tools and uncovered more of their story, the shock has been unavoidable. The line dividing Neanderthals from us was never as clear as textbooks once declared. These were not half animals grunting in caves. They were humans in every sense, shaping stone tools with astonishing precision, caring for their injured, burying their dead, and leaving behind signs of culture that mirror our own earliest footsteps. Imagine Europe during their reign, vast prehistoric forests stretching for miles, glaciers carving valleys into frozen sculpture, and in the midst of it, Neanderthal bands navigating survival with skill, their stocky builds adapted to the cold, their minds carrying traditions and knowledge passed through generations. Fossils show that they crafted spears, not crude sticks but carefully balanced weapons capable of bringing down mammoths and bison, and nearby in caves their hands painted images that blur the boundary between survival and imagination. For decades, scientists resisted calling these expressions art, clinging to the idea that symbolic thought set us apart. But pigment stains, engravings, and etched bones speak for themselves. These people saw the world through a human lens. DNA has sealed the revelation even tighter. For hidden inside every living person outside of Africa lies a fragment of Neanderthal ancestry, tiny percentages woven into our genome, carrying influences over our immune systems, our skin, even our ability to adapt to different climates. This is not the legacy of strangers, but of family, the residue of ancient unions when Homo sapiens and Neanderthals met, mingled, and created offspring who carried both lineages forward. As we dig deeper, the once familiar narrative of replacement and extinction begins to fracture. Neanderthals did not simply vanish, they became part of us, absorbed into our identity, their voices whispering in our blood. Consider the tenderness revealed in fossilized skeletons of individuals who lived for years with crippling injuries, cared for by their group rather than left behind, a level of compassion we once claimed as uniquely our own. Think of the necklaces of eagle talons, the pigments ground into powder, the shells drilled with holes to hang as ornaments, all testaments to a desire for beauty, belonging, and meaning. And yet, for over a century, they were cast as cavemen, hunched and dim-witted, while we elevated ourselves as the pinnacle of creation. The truth is far stranger. There were times when Neanderthals and modern humans looked into each other's eyes across campfires, not as beasts and masters, but as equals, perhaps rivals, perhaps lovers, perhaps even kin who shared songs beneath the same cold stars. Fossil evidence suggests their vocal tracts were capable of speech, and their brains, though differently shaped, were as large as ours, hinting at communication, memory, and story. To dismiss them as anything less than human is to deny the evidence etched into both bone and genome, evidence that now forces experts to reconsider what human even means. If they thought, spoke, crafted, mourned, and dreamed, then we are not the sole heirs of humanity, we are simply the survivors of a branch that intertwined with theirs. As we stand today in museums gazing at reconstructed skulls behind glass, the shock lies not in how different they appear, but in how familiar, the curve of a jaw, the shape of a hand, the subtle expression that could just as easily belong to a neighbor or a friend. They walked the same lands we walk, felt the same winds that cut across icy plains, stared into fires with the same wonder that flickers in our eyes. And when experts say Neanderthals are now reclassified as human, they are not giving us a new headline. They are restoring to them a dignity stolen by centuries of misunderstanding. The boundary between them and us collapses, and what emerges is not a story of superiority but of shared survival in a world that tested every breath. They were human, and in many ways they still are, for their story is written into ours, and without them, we would not be who we are. When modern humans first entered Europe roughly 45,000 years ago, they did not step onto an empty stage but into a world already shaped by Neanderthals. A world where every river valley, every hunting trail, every cave bore the imprint of another kind of human who had called this land home for hundreds of thousands of years. And what followed was not an immediate clash of conquest, but a long, complex entanglement that science is only now unraveling. Fossil discoveries and genetic evidence reveal that the two groups lived side by side for millennia, sometimes in tension, sometimes in cooperation, and often in ways more intimate than either myth or early scholarship allowed. Imagine the scene: a band of modern humans, thin and wiry from their long migration out of Africa, crossing frozen plains to encounter Neanderthals, stockier and powerful, seasoned by generations of survival in Europe's brutal winters. The first glances may have carried fear, suspicion, even hostility, yet beneath the furs and weapons, the eyes that met across that frozen ground were not alien eyes but human ones, capable of recognition, empathy, and curiosity. Archaeological sites suggest that tools and techniques flowed between them, modern humans adopting elements of Neanderthal craftsmanship, while Neanderthals may have learned from the newcomers the finer shaping of blades and ornaments, exchanges that blur any notion of a rigid divide. Genetic evidence deepens this picture further. For every non-African person alive today carries traces of Neanderthal DNA, proof that encounters between the groups were not rare but repeated, intimate and generational, reshaping our genome in ways that still affect us, influencing our immune systems, skin tones, even our sleep cycles. These are not the legacies of an enemy obliterated, but of a people absorbed, mingled, and remembered in flesh itself. Yet the story is not one of harmony alone, for the landscape was unforgiving. Prey scarce, winters devastating, and competition for resources unavoidable. Picture a valley where mammoths graze, a resource worth more than life itself. Both groups watching, waiting, calculating whether to risk conflict or cooperate, each decision carrying consequences for survival. There may have been battles, ambushed under the cover of snow, and moments when one group drove the other from precious hunting grounds, but there were also unions, children born with the features of both lineages, families whose very existence challenges the notion of Neanderthals as outsiders. Cultural evidence adds even more weight, with discoveries of ornaments made from animal teeth, pigments carefully ground and used to decorate bodies or objects, and burials marked with care, all of which reveal a symbolic world once denied to them. These were humans who understood not just the necessity of survival, but the significance of memory and meaning, who honored their dead, who carried traditions that echo faintly into our own rituals. Still, despite this shared humanity, the balance of survival tilted. Within a few thousand years of modern humans spreading through Europe, Neanderthals vanished as a distinct population, their presence surviving only within us. The reasons remain debated: climate shifts that collapsed ecosystems, diseases introduced by newcomers, or the simple arithmetic of smaller numbers colliding with larger populations. But whatever the causes, the result was the same: a once thriving species absorbed and extinguished, their last fires burning out while ours carried on. Yet the shock of their reclassification as fully human changes the tone of that disappearance, for it is no longer the story of primitive beings overwhelmed by superiority, but of one branch of humanity merging into another, their identity surviving in hidden strands of DNA and in artifacts left behind as silent testimony. Picture standing in a cave where Neanderthal hands pressed pigment onto walls 35,000 years ago, the outline of their fingers still visible. It is not the mark of a different species, but of a relative, a person whose desires, fears, and imagination were not so distant from our own. To realize this is to confront a haunting truth, that the dividing lines we draw between ourselves and others, between civilized and savage, between human and animal, have always been fragile illusions, and the story of Neanderthals is proof that humanity has never been a single straight line, but a braided stream of lives. interwoven, sometimes lost, sometimes carried forward. As we dig deeper into fossils and genomes, the question grows larger, not smaller. What does it mean to be human if the very beings we dismissed as other lived, thought, created, and even loved as we do? In the long shadow of prehistory, the shock is not that Neanderthals were different, but that they were never so different at all. And that realization forces us to see ourselves with new, unsettling clarity. The final chapters of the Neanderthal story are not ones of silence but of transformation. For even as their camps dwindled and their last fires flickered against the cave walls, they did not truly vanish. They live within us, woven into the double helix of every person outside Africa, small fragments that carry their memory forward in ways their voices could not. And when scientists reclassify Neanderthals as human, they are not merely adjusting a label in a dusty textbook. They are restoring kinship, acknowledging that the faces who once stared across the frozen valleys of Europe were not failed experiments but family. This realization forces us to rethink not just the past but ourselves, for the story of humanity is not a tale of one species rising in glorious isolation but of overlapping lives, braided destinies, and shared struggles against a world that never promised survival. In caves deep beneath the earth, handprints remain, pressed in ochre by Neanderthal fingers 30 or 40,000 years ago, and when we place our hands beside them, the size, the shape, the feel is uncannily close, as though time itself collapses. These were not others, they were us, and their art, their compassion, their endurance prove that the roots of humanity reach deeper than we dared to believe. To stand before their fossils today is to be humbled, for in their bones we see both the fragility and the resilience of life. And in their DNA we hear the echo of lives that endured storms, hunted giants, and faced extinction with courage. The shocking truth is that humanity has never been one unbroken line but a mosaic. And Neanderthals were a vital piece of that mosaic, a piece we nearly erased through arrogance and misunderstanding. Now, as science redraws the boundaries, we can see them as they truly were, not crude caricatures but humans who dreamed, created, and survived in ways strikingly similar to us. Their story does not diminish ours, it ends it, reminding us that being human has always meant more than belonging to a single lineage. It has meant the ability to adapt, to imagine, to care, and to leave something behind for those who come after. And so, the question lingers, if Neanderthals were human, what other truths still lie hidden in the soil, waiting to append our certainties? What other ancestors whisper through our genes, shaping us in ways we have yet to understand? The past is never dead. It breathes within us, shaping every heartbeat, every step, every thought. As you finish this journey through deep time, remember that the next revelation may be even stranger, even more humbling. Subscribe to this channel, share this story, and continue exploring with us, because the prehistoric world is not gone. It still shapes who we are today, and the mysteries buried in its shadows are far from finished.